Hello shipmates, my name's Jack English. English by name and English by nature too. I wish to tell you a short tale of my naval experiences in this war. Edward VII was on the throne when I joined His Majesty's Navy as a 16-year-old back in 1905, 100 years after our greatest ever naval victory at Trafalgar. Then, Nelson ended any hopes that Napoleon had of ever invading Britain and going on to conquer our empire. Now in 1914, another evil threat looms large across that narrow strip of water, the English Channel. The mighty German army and all its allies are seeking to rule Europe, but, as with Napoleon, they must conquer Britain before they can progress. To crush Britain, however, they need to destroy our navy, which has ruled the waves worldwide since the days of the Armada. And I, for one, will not let them. In this tale you find me aboard my new home, His Majesty's ship Inflexible. She was built in 1907 with the speed of a cruiser and the firepower of a battleship. We had been at sea for 10 days when Captain Beckham at last told us our destination. It was that most distant outpost of our empire, the Falkland Islands. German warships had been attacking defenceless merchant ships, and our spies had warned the Admiralty that these raiders were about to attack that vital anchorage at Port Stanley, and it was our job to stop them. As we raced towards the South Atlantic with our sister ship, HMS Invincible, we scanned the waves constantly for the periscope, which would mean U-boats were in the vicinity. When not on watch, we were kept busy by camouflaging our ships and practicing gunnery. On the 6th of December, we were advised to write to our loved ones, for we would not be home for Christmas. This was a most upsetting experience for us all. A day later we entered the anchorage, which contained several other British warships. Their crews lined the decks, cheering our arrival. This lifted our spirits greatly after our letter writing the previous evening. There was no time to sightsee this strange land, as the next morning a destroyer brought us the news that the enemy had been sighted, sailing towards the Falklands. Admiral Sturdy on the Invincible at once ordered his small fleet to sail out and engage them. We attacked the Germans head-on, and their Admiral von Spee at first tried to run for the open seas, but he realised he had to turn and fight. The Invincible fired the first shots, and 2 plumes of water alongside a German cruiser meant that they were in range. Seconds later, the Inflexible shuddered as we fired a full salvo. Invincible did likewise. Von Spee's flagship, the Scharnhorst, was hit several times. The Invincible also suffered some damage in this exchange, and I noticed other ships were engaging the enemy as the battle spread across the sea. There followed a huge explosion on the Scharnhorst, which in no time caused her to list to starboard. And although she was smoking badly, we still fired salvo after salvo into her. Her crew bravely fired back, but this stopped as she slowly sank. We then turned and fired on another battle cruiser, the Gesnor. Ships were exchanging fire everywhere, but our fleet was in control, and eventually Admiral Sturdy called a ceasefire. We picked up what survivors we could, and as we did so we realised that it could easily have been us in the water. It was a most sobering thought. We had gained a victory of Agincourt proportions. Only one German ship, the Dresden, had escaped, but that too was scuppered some days later. 4 of their battle cruisers were sunk, with other smaller vessels, for we did not lose one single ship. The enemy had nearly 2,000 dead and as many injured, whereas we only lost 10 lives and a score more who were injured. It was a great and moving experience, and I like to think that old Horatio would have been proud of us.
In early January, 2 Zeppelins bombed Great Yarmouth and King's Lynn. The original target had been Humberside, but winds forced a diversion. When approving the plan to bomb Britain, the Kaiser had forbidden raids on London for fear his relatives may be hurt, but the 31st of May saw the first Zeppelin raid on London. The early raids were hoped to persuade the British not to support the war. 20 Zeppelin raids were carried out in 1915, many of them being forced by strong winds away from their intended targets, and they caused the deaths of 181 people. The unexpected high number of volunteers in the early months of the war meant that the workforce was severely depleted. A new workforce had to be recruited. In 1914, employed women were mostly members of the working class, who were doing menial jobs such as working in factories or as servants. Despite the need to find workers for the essential industries, the government took the view that women should not be allowed to replace men. In 1903, Emmeline Pankhurst and her daughters Christabel and Sylvia had founded the Women's Social and Political Union to campaign for women's rights to vote. They had become impatient with the lack of progress of the National Union of Women's Suffragette, which had been established in 1897. Their founder, Millicent Fawcett, believed in using peaceful methods to persuade the government to give women the right to vote. The Pankhursts advocated violence. They and their followers were fully prepared to go to prison and even go on hunger strike to persuade the government to change their mind. However, once Britain declared war, the campaigning ceased, and instead the suffragettes did what they could to assist the war effort. Their Right to Work procession, involving 60,000 women, convinced the government that women were keen to work in traditional male roles. Throughout the war, women did a variety of jobs, many dangerous, that had previously been the domain of male workers, working in shipyards or on public transport being two of the kinds of the jobs in which women were employed from 1915. There's a record of one woman taking over her husband's job as a chimney sweep. Despite the hazards, women worked in munitions factories, and over 200 of them died as a result of accidents. They were originally given the nickname of munitionettes, but once their work with poisonous chemicals made their skin turn yellow as a result of exposure to TNT, they became called the canaries. Most women were paid less than half the wage of a man who'd been doing the same job. A campaign resulted in a rise in the wages of munitionettes, but they still received just under half the wages of their male counterparts. Another milestone for women occurred in September, when a branch of the Women's Institute was opened on Anglesey, with the aim of helping rural communities and encouraging women to become involved in food production. The Institute had been founded in Canada in 1897, and it was a Canadian member, Mrs. Madge Wyatt, who introduced the idea of a British Women's Institute when she told a public meeting in Bangor how it had been established in Canada. A branch was established in Scotland in 1917, with Madge Wyatt again attending the inaugural meeting.
The new year saw little change on the Western Front. More elaborate trenches were dug, particularly by the Germans. The German generals were content with the status quo because it meant they could spare more troops for the Eastern Front, where they needed help to help the Austrians' attacks on Russia. In April, in order to draw attention away from the fact that they were withdrawing troops, the Germans bombed Ypres. This attack, the start of the Second Battle of Ypres, became one of the many unresolved battles, but the Germans had achieved their objective. The plan to move troops to the Cast had succeeded and enabled the German army to wage a successful campaign against Russia, which continued until September. The Second Battle of Ypres is remembered mainly because it is a battle where chlorine gas, a poisonous gas which irritates the respiratory system, was used as a weapon for the first time, despite it being banned by the Hague Conventions of 1899 and 1907. The French had used tear gas grenades in August 1914. The Germans unsuccessfully used tear gas against the Russians early in 1915, when freezing weather had prevented its vaporizing. At Ypres, once the bombing had concluded, a greenish-yellow cloud was spotted by French sentries, causing choking soldiers to panic and run to the rear, leaving gaps in their lines. The Germans were slow to take advantage because they were afraid of the effects of the gas. The Allies were quick to condemn its use as inhumane, and its use outraged neutral powers. One of the main German chemists involved in the development and production of a gas as a weapon was Fritz Haber. He was proud of being a German and defended his work, But it led to personal tragedy as his wife, also a chemist, was appalled by what he was doing, and after an argument about it in May 1915, she shot herself with his service revolver.
Oh, it's from her, Kenneth. Oh,
What does he say, Mum? Is he alright?
he says, "Hello, ma'am. It's been raining cats and dogs here. The water's getting quite deep and there's not much shelter either, so we're hoping it'll stop soon." Do you remember me saying that working on the estate gamekeeping would come in handy one day? Well, it has now. I've been issued with a Leigh Enfield rifle. It fires 15 rounds a minute, not like the rifles on the estate. And because of my experience and being a good shot, they've told me how to be a sniper. Not much chance for that hun, eh ma'am? So no need for you to worry. Oh my God, our Kenneth a sniper.
Well, he said not to worry. What else does he say?
He says, as our Sarah heard from Joe, I haven't seen him since we landed. We were split up. Today we suffered heavy losses, but have little time to mourn them. We ran out of gas masks, so they told us to piss on our hankies and hold it over our face. They said it would be just as good as the mask, but it stinks. I hope Dad's leg's getting better and the brake's healing well. I bet he's getting on your nerves stuck in the house most of the time. You're right there, son, he is. Bus closed now, Mum, back on duty soon. We'll write again soon when I get a spare moment. Give my love to little Lizzie and our Sarah. Hope she's heard from Joe and that he's not gone missing. Please write soon. Can't wait to hear news from home. Look after yourselves. Love, Kenneth.
Missing, killed in action. The Battle of Lewes. High deep in hell, crawling through bloody remnants, fellow comrades blown apart, the stench of death, smoke and debris, raging gunfire, searching for refuge. Missing, killed in action. The Battle of Lewes. Awaiting death at any moment, darkness engulfs my tortured soul. You do not know what Flanders means. Flanders means endless human endurance. Flanders means blood and scraps of human bodies. Flanders means heroic courage and faithfulness unto death. Missing, killed in action. The Battle of Lewes. By September, the Allies were still unable to break the stalemate. Any small victories on either side were soon reversed as territory gained was lost again. At this time, France was the senior of the Allies, and their commander-in-chief, Joseph Joffre, decided to go on the offensive, hoping to force the Germans into battle. He believed that the British, who had so far been used mainly in a defensive role, had shown at Aubers Bridge that they were capable of attacking, and asked them to be part of this planned action. British commanders Sir John French and Field Marshal Haig both initially felt that Lewes, which was to be the British part of the Third Battle of Artois, was unsuitable for an attack, but persuaded themselves that it would be possible with the use of gas. The battle started on the 25th of September and concluded mid-October. The British almost succeeded in breaking a part of the German lines, but the failure of Sir John French to deploy his reserves in time gave the enemy the opportunity to close the gap before they arrived. For the British government, this was one mistake too many for the French, who was replaced as Commander-in-Chief by Sir Douglas Haig in December. Apart from casualties numbering almost 60,000, the Battle of Lewes is notable for the first British use of gas as a weapon. The release of the gas had mixed results. The wind blew it back onto the British troops, who, finding it difficult to breathe in the gas mask they had been given, removed them. Lewes also saw the use of tactical bombing for the first time when the Royal Flying Corps dropped bombs on strategic targets such as railway lines and also onto German soldiers.
Edith Louisa Cavell was born in 1865 in Norfolk, the daughter of the vicar of the village of Swardeston. She originally had worked as a governess, but then trained to be a nurse at the London hospital. She had learned to speak French as a child, apparently effortlessly, and in 1907 she moved to Brussels, having been appointed matron of a new nursing school. Traditionally, nursing had been done by nuns, but the school was established for the training of lay nurses. Edith emphasised to her nurses the importance of good hygiene and had them wear dresses, white aprons and white collars, a contrast to unhygienic traditional robes worn by nuns. She had returned home, visiting her sick father when the Germans invaded Belgium in 1914. She immediately returned to the training school. She had not been back long when 2 stranded British soldiers sought refuge at the school. They, along with others who followed, were helped by Edith and others from the training school to escape via a series of houses to neutral Holland. About 200 soldiers, both British and German, were nursed and helped to safety. But at the end of July 1915, 2 members of the escape team were arrested, followed early in August by the arrest of Edith. A secret trial was held at which she was charged with treason and admitted that she was guilty. She and 4 members of the team were sentenced to death. Despite the attempts of ambassadors from USA and Spain, they were all executed by a firing squad on the 12th of October.
You feeling today, Frank?
Much better now. I'm looking at the lovely nurse taking care of my mangled body.
I believe you, Frank. It must be so much better to be here than in the trenches.
You bet it is. I'm sorry for all those poor beggars who had to stay behind. If it wasn't for getting a Blighty, I'd still be there fighting Fritz.
What do you mean by Blighty?
Getting injured in a way that gets you home to England. Back to dear old Blighty, my lass. That's where a Blighty is. Most injuries get treated out there on the battlefield and the lads are sent back to fight. It's sad to think that losing my foot and getting bits of shrapnel stuck in my chest makes me feel lucky. What date is it? I seem to be losing my sense of time as well as my foot.
It's the 14th of October 1915, Frank. Haven't you seen the newspaper?
No, I haven't. What?
Have you heard of Edith Costello?
Nurse? Of course I have. All the lads have. She went to Belgium when war was declared and worked at the Red Cross Hospital. What a devoted and courageous woman. She helped a lot of people escape to Belgium from German occupation. A very brave thing to do. She's someone we all should be very proud of.
We are, Frank, all very, very proud of her.
Well, why are you asking about it?
That's why I asked. I've just seen the paper. The Germans have charged her with treason and court-martialed her. She was executed in Cherbourg 2 days ago.
That can't be true, are you sure?
7 o'clock in the morning. I'm only telling you what I've read, Frank.
Oh my God, I hope it isn't true. She saved so many lives, 200 British soldiers, prisoners of war.
It is true, Frank. The paper had a quote, something she told Reverend Sterling Gahan, the Anglican chaplain, who gave her her Holy Communion. She said, patriotism is not enough. I must have no hatred or bitterness towards anyone. Then, just before she was shot, she spoke to the German Lutheran prison chaplain, Paul Refsua. She said, ask Father Gahan to tell my loved ones later on that my soul, as I believe, is safe and that I am glad to die for my country.
Will you help me to stand up? I'd like to pay my respects to her.
I will, and I'd be honoured to pay my respects with you.
Edith Cavell, a great nurse and a very courageous English lady. She will be remembered for generations to come.
And may God have mercy on her soul. Amen.
Amen.
Edith was allowed a visit on the night before her execution by an English chaplain, who subsequently reported her patriotism is not enough speech. Her execution caused an outrage in America. British newspapers proclaimed her a martyr, and the news caused another rush of volunteers. After the war, Her body was returned to England. She was given a state funeral at Westminster Abbey and then taken by train to Norwich, where her remains are interred in the cathedral.
On the 20th of October 1914, the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, had allied itself with the Central Powers of Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it helped Germany to attack Russia. The Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II, asked Britain for help in the form of a diversionary attack on Turkey. Winston Churchill proposed a plan in which the Royal Navy would take control of the Dardanelles Strait in northwestern Turkey by sweeping the minefields and then firing on the forts based on Gallipoli Peninsula, which dominated the strait. Once secured, the Navy would sail through the strait into the Sea of Marmara and take control of the Turkish capital of Constantinople, situated at the easterly end of the sea. It was hoped that the control of Constantinople would force Turkey out of the war. In February 1915, and again in March, naval bombardments attempted to overwhelm the Turkish defences on the Gallipoli Peninsula. They failed, and so a Mediterranean expeditionary force comprising British, French and Australian and New Zealand, ANZAC, Canadian and Indian troops was sent to take control of the Dardanelles. The landings on the beaches of the peninsula started in the early morning of the 25th of April. No opposition had been anticipated, but forewarned of the possibility of an attack by the earlier naval bombardments, the Turkish leaders, with the aid of German advisors, had improved their defences, and waiting soldiers fired on the Allied troops from the high cliffs of the peninsula. Trapped on the beaches, the members of the expeditionary force could neither attack nor retreat and were forced to dig trenches. By autumn, critics of the expedition were calling for an evacuation. The Gallipoli commander, Sir Ian Hamilton, was replaced by General Sir Charles Monro. Monro realised that the inexperience of many of the officers and the condition of the sick, partly trained troops meant that the Allies could not conduct a successful campaign. He also advocated evacuation. At the end of November, with the onset of winter, and the troops now suffering from dysentery, diarrhoea and frostbite, the decision was made to evacuate. The determining factor in this decision was Bulgaria's entry into the war as an ally of the Central Powers. The defence of Serbia and of Turkey's neighbours Greece, who had asked the Allies powers for support, became a priority. The successful evacuation of troops started in December 1915 and was completed in January 1916. The Gallipoli campaign was a disaster. The total Allied casualties numbered about 188,000 dead, missing, wounded and prisoners of war. Total of the estimated Turkish casualties is 250,000. 6 Victoria Crosses were awarded during this campaign. 2 of the recipients were from the Wigan area. Private William Keneally, who was born in Wexford but lived in Ashton in Makerfield. He died at Gallipoli on the 29th of June. Corporal, later Colonel John Elisha Grimshaw of Abram, survived the war and died in 1980.
Do you know who you are? Can you remember your name?
No.
Well, you are George Potter Bagshaw. Does that name mean anything to you? You're a Sergeant George, NCO, 1st 6th Foresters, an orderly to the medical officer. You had a diary in your uniform.
Bagshaw, George Bagshaw. No, nothing I can't remember.
Take your time, George. The doctor says your sight and memory will return soon. But in the meantime, if you want, we'll read some of your diary to you. Apparently, on the 27th of May, you were sent to Ballure to the Clearing Hospital. You'd been gassed. Then on the 31st of May, you came back to England on the hospital ship Lilac. Do you remember any of that trip, George?
No, nurse, nothing.
Don't worry, George. Take your time. We'll read some of the diary to you bit by bit and let's see if it'll trigger something. 25th February 1915. Leave Southampton on the ship Maydew. The searchlight is thrown on us, and a voice comes over the sea through a siren wishing us good luck. We're on board all day and all night, well guarded all the way.
I remember this. I remember me and John come over to a trench. It was an English voice, no an accent yet. I even remember his name, Robert Bruce. Poor lad had had his arm blown to bits. But you know what, he was in a German trench. And it was the German soldiers there who helped him and who helped us get him out. Gosh, I remember that. They didn't want to be there any more than we did.
Oh George, what a thing to have to remember. I think we'll leave it there for the moment and let your mind get some rest. We can read some more tomorrow. I'll go make a nice cup of tea.
Thanks, nurse, you've been so kind.
I'm bleeding.
Englander?
Oh, it was a German.
Englander, comrade, we will help you. Your pals will come for you.
Thank you.
We do not want this conflict. It is only the generals and politicians. We could be shot for helping you, but we will help any wounded soldier.
My friends are over there. Let's hope this war ends soon. Thank you.
It's good to know you've got your sight back, George. How are you?
A lot better now. A lot better now, and I can see.
Is the diary helping with the memory? Are you managing to read it okay?
Yes, I remember a lot of it. A lot of it a bit sketchy, and some of it I would rather forget. But that doesn't help, does it? I'll keep reading it.
8th of March. Reveille at 5:30 AM. We're working just behind firing lines, making corduroy paths through woods. All the time, stray bullets and shells are whistling through trees. In the middle of the morning, we get the word that Lance Corporal Redfern has been shot through the heart by a sniper. Half an hour later, we bury him in the cemetery at Woods. 12th of March. We've been standing by all day, but tonight we can see artillery duel in distance. Part of the mill has been used as an ammunition store by Germans before the English blew it up. I never saw iron twisted so much in my life. Nearby there's a big naval gun, 15.7 inches. It shoot the old factory when it fired. Aeroplanes are flying in all directions. 24th of March. We've now moved to fresh billets 2 miles away. We watched the first Sherwoods come in for a rest from trenches. It's a pathetic sight to see the soldiers coming in tired out. They all looked ready for a good rest.
On the 1st of May, the RMS Lusitania sailed from New York, heading for Liverpool. When her owners, the Cunard Line, had advertised the trip in the New York Times and other newspapers, the German embassy responded with their own advertisement, often placed at the side of it, warning Americans not to sail to Europe on ships carrying the British flag, or that of any of our allies, because these ships were considered legitimate targets. They stated that passengers sailing to the war zone did so at their own risk. People still booked their passage, believing that the ship would not be attacked. On the 7th of May, a German submarine torpedoed and sank the Lusitania off the coast of County Cork, Ireland. Germany's response to international condemnation was to state that she had a right to attack because the ship was armed and was carrying war materials. The total number of passengers and crew was 1,959, including 128 Americans. The death toll was 1,198.
My darling Tommy, I was so grateful to receive your last letter, as the time between receiving each one gets longer and I get so worried. The mud sounds dreadful and the rats must create a lot of problems for you. How simply awful. Cannot begin to imagine what it must be like to hear those shells exploding in the distance. But you are brave, my dearest. You have been well trained, so you will know what to do. Life at the hospital is getting more hectic. 400 souls from the Somme are now arriving on our wards. It's a sorry sight. Some destroyed in both body and mind. We do the best we can for them. Some of them have a great sense of humour and they do manage to cheer up the ward. But some are just silent and too numb to even think. I look at them and my heart sinks because I can only think of you. I just want you to be home, away from danger. But I know that it isn't possible, but I pray for you all the time. Christmas was fun though, but even though I was working. We did our best to make it a good one for all the patients with Christmas dinner, singing carols and giving out presents that the local people had donated. The local vicar came and I think that some of the men really appreciated him coming and some found peace. Today is New Year's Eve and as the year ends, my hope is that 1916 will bring an end to this dreadful war. I know that here at home we are not being told everything that is happening in France, but from what we do see on the newscasting and from your letters, I do know that the conditions are beyond what I can even imagine. I do too miss you so much, Tommy, and despite the disappointment of not being able to marry last Christmas, I know that one day we will. My wedding dress and hat have been wrapped away carefully and put away, safely waiting for our special day. I also long for you to hold me tightly in your arms, making me feel safe and warm. Keep safe, my darling, and imagine I'm kissing you Happy New Year. With fondest love, Grace.